Title: How I Survived the Smiling Man. They say 1 in 5 people have encountered something beyond explanation, an event so chilling that it defies logic, leaving a scar on their psyche that never truly heals. I used to think these stories were just that, stories. A way to spook the gullible or entertain those with a taste for the macabre. But now, I know better. As usually I was heading home after a night shift at the local ER. It had been busy just like any other night. I was making my way through the empty streets. The city was eerily quiet, the kind of quiet that makes you question if you're the only one left in the world. Street lights flickered above, casting long, twisted shadows that seemed to move on their own. I was lost in thought, too tired to notice the figure standing under one of those flickering lights until I was almost upon it. He stood there, still as a statue, dressed in an old-fashioned suit that looked out of place in the modern world. His head was tilted slightly, as if he was listening for something only he could hear. And then, I saw his face, or rather, his smile. It was the kind of smile that crawls under your skin and settles there, a smile that's all wrong. Too wide, too perfect, stretching across his face in a grotesque parody of joy. His teeth gleamed unnaturally white under the dim light, but his eyes were black holes, devoid of anything human. I froze. My body screamed at me to run, but my legs wouldn't move. It was as if his gaze had rooted me to the spot, draining the warmth from my bones. Then, without warning, he moved. It wasn't a step or a turn. It was more like a lurch, a sudden jerk forward that brought him a few inches closer. His movements were jarring, like a puppet with tangled strings. He began to sway, his body contorting in unnatural ways as he danced in slow, deliberate motions. But that smile, it never wavered, never faltered. It was as if he was mocking me, daring me to join him in his twisted dance. Panic surged through me, finally breaking the spell. I turned and ran, my heart pounding in my chest, but no matter how fast I moved, I could feel him behind me, always just a step away. His laughter, a low, rasping chuckle, echoed in the night, growing louder, more sinister with each passing second. I reached my apartment in a blind frenzy, barely managing to unlock the door before slamming it shut behind me. My hands shook so violently I could hardly turn the lock. I pressed my back against the door, gasping for breath, waiting for the inevitable knock, for the sound of him scratching at the wood, desperate to get inside. But there was nothing, just the suffocating silence of my darkened apartment. I slid down to the floor, my mind racing, trying to make sense of what had just happened. Had I imagined it? Was it some kind of waking nightmare brought on by exhaustion? But then I saw it, a small, crumpled piece of paper lying on the floor, just inside the door. With trembling fingers, I picked it up and unfolded it. In neat, elegant handwriting, it read, "You can't run forever." My blood turned to ice. I checked every window, every door, but there was no sign of him. Still, I didn't sleep that night. I couldn't. Every creak of the floorboards, every whisper of the wind against the glass felt like a threat, a promise that he was still out there, waiting. The days that followed were a blur of paranoia and fear. I rushed home before dark, never daring to look back, always feeling those hollow eyes on me, that smile lurking in the periphery of my vision. I stopped going out after sundown altogether, barricading myself inside, hoping, praying, that he wouldn't find a way in. But the smiling man doesn't need to break down doors or crawl through windows. He gets inside your head, digs in deep, and festers there like a disease. His smile haunts your every waking moment. His laugh echoes in your dreams until you can't tell where the nightmare ends and reality begins. Weeks passed, and the fear began to eat away at me, gnawing at my sanity. I became a ghost of myself, jumping at shadows, sleeping with the lights on. But even then, in the safety of my own home, I could feel him watching me. And then, one night, he returned. It was the dead of night, and I was lying in bed, eyes wide open, unable to sleep. That's when I heard it, the faint sound of music, old, scratchy, like it was playing from an ancient gramophone. It drifted through the walls, soft at first, but growing louder, closer. And then I realized it wasn't music at all. It was humming. I shot up in bed, my heart racing, and there, standing in the corner of my room, was the smiling man. His smile was wider than ever, his eyes gleaming with a sickening glee. He didn't move, didn't speak. He just stood there, humming that eerie tune, his body swaying in rhythm with the sound. In that moment, I knew I was trapped. There was no escaping him. I was his, and he knew it. Desperation took hold. I grabbed the closest thing to me, a lamp, and hurled it at him, but he didn't flinch. The lamp shattered against the wall, and he began to move, slowly, deliberately, his smile never wavering. I screamed, stumbling out of bed, but there was nowhere to go. Nowhere to hide. And then, just as suddenly as he had appeared, he was gone. The room was empty, the humming ceased. But the damage was done. I knew he was still out there, lurking in the shadows, waiting for the perfect moment to strike again. I left that night, packing what little I could carry and fleeing the city. I moved across the country, changing my name, my appearance, everything. For years, I lived in constant fear, always looking over my shoulder, waiting for that smile to find me again. And slowly, the fear began to fade. I thought maybe, just maybe, I had escaped him. But I know better now. The smiling man doesn't forget. He's always there, lurking in the dark corners of your mind, waiting for the moment when you finally let your guard down. When you're finally convinced you're safe. And then, when you least expect it, he'll be there, smiling, ready to dance his twisted dance once more. So, if you ever find yourself alone on a quiet night, and you see a figure standing under a streetlight, dressed in an old-fashioned suit, run. Run as fast as you can, and don't look back. Because if you do, you'll see him there, smiling, his eyes locked on you, waiting to play his game. And trust me, you don't want to play.